He is a professor of economics at Northwestern University also. He is the president and founding member of the Syrian American Society, which is a very active organization, opposition organization here in the United States, based in Chicago. And he has been a very close family friend. I've known him for a long time. He has always been part of the opposition. This is not something new to him. To either of these speakers, two wonderful gentlemen who've been fighting ever since ever since they had a reason to do anything, which was probably from the beginning of their lives. I mean, the gentlemen were born and raised in Syria, and they have been living through the suppression for as long as they can remember. He's an economics professor, like I said, and his areas of interest include poverty and development, economic growth, and market mechanisms during democratic transition. And without further ado, Mohyeddin Kassar.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Hamid, Nassar, and Yamen, Masalkhy this far. It's better like this. I'd like to thank them for organizing this event. And in fact, I'm very familiar with these stories, and every time I hear it, I become speechless. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to give you what you deserve in this presentation after what I heard from Dr. Barak. And this is not the first time I hear the story of Dr. Barak. And it is a story of, I think, more than 200,000 Syrians. They have the same story, plus or minus. But I'm very proud to sit down next to Dr. Barak because it is the real representation of the Syrian people who come from hell and go to Harvard and now teaching at Northwestern University, as his book said, isn't it? And this is really tell you what kind of quality the Syrian people have. Sometimes the people crisis kill the creativity and kill the spirit of fight and persistence and the spirit of living in the people, but it was not the case of the Syrian people. In my presentation is not going to be as sentimental as the one we see and as heartbreaking as this one we heard about. But I would like to focus on 3 areas today and trying to just give you a tease of what's happening there and in the political scene, and reflect on the determination of the Syrian people for getting rid of dictatorship, and how the international community should and how they can help our people to standing on their feet again. In last visit, one of the visits I was in Syria, I was, when you visit a country like Syria, you have 2 tariffs in the cab. You take a cab, a taxi, and the driver will give you a different price depending on your face. And if you are a foreigner or if you are a tourist, you're gonna get a tourist tariff. But I am Syrian and I speak Arabic fluently. I don't have any accent in Arabic. And so I asked the driver, how do you know that I am expatriate? And we were driving downtown Damascus on the, by traffic lights, and he told me, I know. I said, but I didn't talk to you anything. You knew that I am expatriate. I'm coming here for summer visit. So how did you know that? I said, look around you. And I look around, I look at the street, and I found what I'm looking at. He said, none of these guys are smiling except you. And this is true. I just chucked me like this. You can tell that the Syrian citizen is carrying all this weight on his back, walking, carrying that, heavy weight. And that's why we called Syria is the kingdom of silence and the kingdom of fear. Because for 50 years, it was governed with fear and silence. And most importantly, it's a kingdom of learned helplessness. there is whole machine at the governmental level that its job is to enforce helplessness in the mentality of the people. You can do nothing. And to give you an example, in Daria, in 2001, after the Bashar Assad took over his father's position, a group of college students get together and say, we would like to use our summer empty time to clean our city, which is a small city in suburb of Damascus. Now it becomes very famous for non-violent movement in Syria. Daria is like 5 kilometers away from the center of Damascus. So they group around themselves, the students of college and the high school students, and went to the mayor of the city and said, all what we need to do from you in summer is just give us the equipment, which means the brooms and the stuff to clean our city, the state of our city. And the answer was, if we want to clean the city, we will do it ourselves. 16 leaders of this group went to jail between 3 months and 6 years just for this project. And you will wonder yourself, like, why did they do that? This is where learned helplessness comes from. They tell you, you are not the master of your future. You are not the master of your action. If we want to clean the cities, we will clean it for you. You have no decision in making. And when we clean it, we will order you to clean it for us. Maybe we'll talk about that. So this is the situation of Syria with Assad for 50 years. Another example we can get is the cartoons that drawn by Danish cartoonists. Do you remember that? Of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be with him, and he is mocking the Prophet, and everything went crazy. Rallies in Damascus went into the Danish embassy and they burned it down. And this is unprecedented in Syria's political life for the last 50 years, that rally go and do something on their own. So I called my friends in Syria and said, like, what's going on? He said, it is the police secret who did the rally and who burned down the embassies. What's the message is sent here? It's two-sided message. The first message, that I, the regime, I am the one who protecting you from this European who hate you, and I'm gonna let you go and rally in the street. In the same way, the message went out to the Danish and the European, look, if I am not on the top of these guys, these savages are gonna attack Europe. This is the message sent out. So you have a country governed with fear, with helplessness, and there is the concept that you, the Syrian, are against the entire world. Everybody outside of Syria hates Syrians. This is how Syrians are fed this information. Either because they are imperialists, either because they are supporting Israel, either because they want to take slaves. You call it, you find it in the Syrian propaganda. Just name one of it, and the reason of hatred is existed in the Syrian propaganda. And by the way, I imagine the same picture in North Korea today. Okay, how you maintain a society under this pressure without this machine of making the people feel alone. Now, I live in Damascus, which is like 200 kilometers away from Hama, where 40,000 people died in 1982. I know people who are disinterested in politics who never heard about that and living in Damascus in 1982. But what's the difference today? Well, the difference today is with the communication, with the internet, with the Facebook, with the YouTube. Your fight it is not anymore local. When you die, your death is not in vain anymore. When you go to jail, as Dr. Barat said, the worst thing happened to you in jail when you feel like the people outside forget why you are in jail. I went to jail for you guys. That's only the compensation I want, that you feel that I went to jail for you. In that time, in the 80s, there is none of that. For that, when 13 months ago, the revolution started because they saw that when they do an act, and there was several trials, the first demonstration in Damascus, the second rally in Damascus was 200 students, one of them pregnant 6 months, got arrested. And the news went over the Facebook and the network. Every one of us did his or her homework and went all over that. Now they start feeling, okay, if we do something, even if we die, but it's not gonna be in vain. And that's what changed a lot for Syria. And in the last 13 months, we succeeded to break the fear, we succeeded to break the helplessness, and most importantly, we succeeded to get out of the mentality of we are alone in the battle for freedom. And that's a huge idea, a huge consequences has. When I tell my friend in Damascus, like I was at noon on public radio talking about your fight, you don't have the shot of cortisone they get in their effort. Because they said, oh, okay, everybody hear about what I'm doing. I'm not dying in vain. So we moved from people walking in the street carrying this weight on their back into people today, the mother send her child to a peaceful rally, he gets shot. She buries him, and the next day send her second child out, and send the third child out. They fail. Okay, freedom, we are able and willing to pay the price for it. And the Syrian during this 13 months proved to everybody that they are not less attached to freedom, to democracy's value than anybody else in the world. The revolution, the Syrian Revolution, might look until now headless. And this is how a revolution look like, and must look like. Because a revolution that has had a head, you know, how many members of a Republican Party we have in America? 2 million, for example, let's say 2 million. If Assad was living in White House, he would gather all the Republican Party members in jail. He wouldn't mind about that. If you have 40,000 prisoners out of 5 million, take the percentage out of 300 million. How many Americans would have in jail? So a revolution has to be headless. A revolution has to be done by the young, by the illuminated, not the Illuminati, but illuminated people, and by those who are willing to change. My generation at the edge, there is one generation above me, but most of the people in the revolution are younger than I am. And this generation is sending the message. They are willing to learn quickly, and they are willing to pay the first, second, and I think we are at the 4th level of leadership in the battle. The first level, second level, third level of leadership has been either died or in jail. And sometimes they get arrested not because the government or the regime knows that they are leadership. No, because in Syria today you get arrested just because you pass by a inspection point. The guy didn't like your head, you're gone. You know? And they put you in jail. High schools converted to jails. Movie theater converted to jails. and you got forgotten there. If you are lucky, they will remember you and call you for interrogation. Okay? And this is, in spite of all this atrocity happening today in Syria, the revolution keep going. And we see it on TV. We see how bloody the regime is. The revolution talk about these young people, talk about a new era and a new times. They talk about freedom. They talk about the relationship between the faith and the freedom. They don't distinguish between them. Faith and freedom has to go hand in hand. Democracy and faith has to go hand in hand for them. And they tell you, all these dogmatic view you have in the past, we have to throw them away. We have to talk about unity of society. There is nothing called minority. There is nothing called majority. There is a citizenship. And this is something very important in the Middle East. We have to work on that. And this is a nation, it's being born again with the new values and a new future. But unfortunately, the regime is as bloody as before. I can't even imagine being historian after the fallen regime and digging in all these documents Dr. Bara talked about, and all these cases and coming out with the stories. We're going to hear stories, terrible stories. So the regime holding with his teeth to their power. Assad proved that he's as bloody as his brother and his father. And Assad proved that he is not alone in power. There is whole, what we call it, Ikhwanta, the term from South America in the 80s, that governing the country with blood and willing to sacrifice everything. And the battle we have now, is a battle of wills. The will of the power, the will of the people against the will of the regime. And the regime, in my book and in my information, okay, is like a house of cards. It does not stand except on the illusion of power, not on the power really. For that, his propaganda system, every morning bombarding the people with the same idea. They are alone against everybody else. Even in the rows of the so-called opposition, the ones who are the closest to the regime in the rows of the opposition are the one who is always telling us that we are alone and America is not with us, the West is not with us, everything is not with us, and we have to fight the battle by ourselves as Syrians. And for example, anybody has a gram of brain will understand that in news telling you that Russia is giving $20 billion debt or loan to the Syrian regime. Anybody will hear this news and understand that doesn't make sense. And even with that, the regime making this propaganda every day. And last summer, he made an announcement saying, of course he always leak it to the news in a way that you can't catch him in a lie, but he leaked it in the news as a rumor, as a story, that Qatar, the state of Qatar, is giving him $2 billion assistantship. And 2 days after that, the Qatar closed its embassy in Damascus. So those examples, every morning the regime woke up on TV and you hear him, it is over, it is done, the revolution is over, the riot is done, there is no more. He wants to convince us again to go back to the helplessness situation, to go back to the fear of the others, and continuously bombard us with the conspiracy theory It is an imperialism, it is communism, it is, you call it, against Syria. But that's not sticking this time, because the Syrian people, as I said, they break out the circle of fear, and I'm run out of time.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Let me conclude with something, but I will leave that. I have one more point, because I did not. I think. Let me conclude with 1 minute. I think, and I let your question later in the period of questions. We can answer some more. Talk about that more. Today, the United Nations resolution is useless. What we have in hand. We need to act. And Mrs. Clinton and Alain Juppé, that as a Syrian, I don't wish that. But I'm afraid there is no other solution. And there is local powers, regional powers, such as Turkey and Saudi Arabia. They are able and willing in a good time, to intervene and solve the problem of the regime in Syria. We need this intervention. We need to get Syria out of the claws of Iran sooner than later. We need to create the situation where there is no more this conflict in Syria. They have a regime that's democratic, having real representation of its people, and creating a good relationship with its neighbor. Is it going to happen? Yes, it's going to happen. And maybe if we come here next year, we talk about Syria after Assad, inshallah, by God willing, we will remember that we will have only two solutions. Either we're going to have foreign intervention, instantaneous, which means speedy intervention, and save ourselves a lot of blood and time for the Syrians, or we are going to go through steps, one by one, and every step will lead us to one more step saying that there is no other solution than the intervention. Because the word of the regime saying, I am living in the presidential palace, and if you are strong enough, come and take me out. And that's what the regime is saying. But the people in Syria saying, you know what? That's not going to stick this time. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for taking more time.
One thing I just wanted to add on, and I was going to say this in my little skit, but I probably forgot about it. But as Nassar was saying, that the regime is just prone to systematically lie and propagate, these false accusations. I don't know if anybody here has been following what's been going on. You probably know the story of Hamid This was in the first few months of the revolution, when these protests were just starting to get a little bit bigger, people were going out. There was a little boy, and this is just one story among many, even at that time, who was arrested by the regime and taken in. He was just 13 years old. And nobody heard from him for a few weeks, and then he was returned to his family. His body was just puffed up from torture. He had cigarette marks all over him. They would just, as they're torturing him, put out their cigarettes on his body. His genitals were cut off. He was, had all major bones in his body broken. 13 years old. And right away, when people are asking questions, now of course when they return the body, what happens is they return the body to the family. Not so that they have proof of what happened, but when you get a body like that, the idea is that you're going to be too scared to say anything. Let your child rest in peace and just, shut up. We're going to just, put this revolution down. What Hamid al-Khatib's family did was they broadcast what happened to him. And what was the regime's answer was that they brought a doctor, an expert, quote unquote, and they said, we reviewed the tapes and there's no sign of torture. If you see the video, there's absolutely no explanation. It just makes you cry just when you see it. And then, as time went on, it went from, he wasn't, not that they didn't torture him, but that it was necessary. you know, and people made such a big deal about this, and it became really an icon of the revolution. And the and more, you know, people talked about it, their narrative changed from, you know, we didn't kill him, torture him, so that he wouldn't do these horrible things. So I mean, that's, you know, that's what we're up against, a regime that is just used to basically just broadcasting whatever they can to shut people up and just stay in power at any cost. I'm going to open the floor to any questions. If you have any questions at all about the revolution, about the Assad regime, anything that has to do with Syria, please go ahead. I know you guys have questions. Okay, well, I'll start us. Go ahead, Bob.
Well, it's the proverbial question, but I'm only recently learning about Syria, but where my wife and I work very much in a group called Friends of Palestine, and even a couple years ago we didn't know very much about the Middle East. So the question, as I hear this, I watch the struggle of people in various places. I'm very encouraged to know that people believe that they're not alone. But what can we do to help the people of Syria?
I think given that what I just said, the solution is going to be unfortunate solution. Personally, I would love that the regime say, okay, take the power, guys, don't fight among yourselves, and I'm leaving in a month. So that would be a very rosy scenario, and it's not going to happen. I think one of the major things as an American, we have to build awareness about the situation in Syria. And a letter to our congressman would be very helpful, telling the congressman that we are interested in what's happening in Syria. And we are aware that we are in an election year, but that should not disengage ourselves from our moral obligation. It is an extraordinary opportunity, the Arab Spring, what we call it Arab Spring in the last year, for America to rebuild its relationship with the most powerful population on earth, the Muslim community. We need to go back and ask ourselves why we have this conflict between the America and the Muslim. When I came to America, I felt like I'm like the first. The same reason I came to America is the same reason that Mayflower comes to America. They run away with their belief, and I run away with my belief to America. So there is no reason to have this conflict between America and the Muslim world, and especially the Arab world. So this Arab Spring will help us rebuild this relationship on cooperation. And if we send our congressmen telling them, you know what, this is something of interest of us. It's time to think about why these guys on the other side of the fence. Is there a way to be on the same side? What America did in Libya, you cannot have an imagination. You can't even imagine the positive effect of what America did in Libya on the American image in the Arab world and the Muslim world. For once, we are on the right side of the equation. Okay? And in Syria, if we think Libya is heavyweight in the Arab world, I think Syria is the heaviest country in the Middle East. Since the eternity, the one who has Syria in his hand. I mean, Syria cannot be power by itself. But no other power, regional power in the Middle East, can become a regional power unless Syria is on its side. And this is our opportunity to talk to our congressman, saying, listen guys, we would like you to take notice of what's happening in Syria. We would like you to support what's happening in Syria. Senator McCain had a very nice position about Syria. He visited the area, he visited refugee camps in Turkey, and this is a very courageous step. And we need to encourage such involvement. President Obama, until now, he's talking tough, but we didn't see his action. Okay? We need to build our friend in Syria, and this is the season to build friends in Syria. In 1917 or 18, after the First World War, the French wanted to occupy Syria, and they wanted to put it under the French mandate. So the United Nations sent a committee to investigate in Syria, saying, do they want these guys to become mandate? The mandate system is saying, you are a new country or a new state, okay? And we're gonna assign a big state to take care of you until you stand on your own. This is what the mandate says. So the commission conclusion came back saying, the Syrian people do not believe they need that. But if it has to be, let it be the United States of America. So we need to get out of this dogmatism in our international relationship. And this is the opportunity to say, you know what, America can be on the good side of the equation and make peace with these guys. That's the best way, this best time. You know, the best time to have to make friends with your neighbor is like when he has fire in his house, isn't it? And that's something we can do that.
I have a comment. Last July, I think, we met Senator Dick Durbin, and obviously he heard what's going on in Syria, but when I chose a video showing soldiers killing a person just before the blood in the streets. So you can tell, you can see his face when he saw it. So he said to me, "What is that?" I said, "Just watch it. I don't want to take your time," because he was leaving. So just that video. Literally, we don't need to talk a lot about what should be done. Like this cannot stand. Like just I was on the way here when my twin told me that there is a video showing that they are burying a person alive, asking him to say no God but Bashar. I said I put it on my Facebook. When you come back, just see it and spread it. Just we have thousands of videos just showing this cannot stand. So I think talking to the senators and congressmen, that's one way. We know there are a number of PR companies in Washington, D.C. They are acting for Assad because they work for money, but that's what we can do. We are not satisfied with, because I talked the other day to a prominent journalist in Washington, D.C., and she said to me literally, so there is no intention to interfere in Syria. I said, this is your golden chance to break the back of Iran. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to keep negotiating with Iran. Just to break the back of Assad, Iran is done. What are you waiting? This is a chance that people are asking you to come in, and you say we don't. Since when? Like I said, there is no decision to do that. So the only way that can change their mind is just to see the atrocities. This cannot stand, as they did in Libya. When Gaddafi just declared that he will go into Benghazi, the world understood. You cannot. This is a matter of days or hours. Now we passed this threshold long time ago in Syria. They said they will not allow another Hama. The streets of Homs now like Hama, no difference. I saw Hama after the massacre. It's exact carbon copy. So that's what we can do.
Yes. Recently, the New Republic published an article by James Harden about Syria that basically stated that the revolution has stalled from where it was a year ago, even 5 months ago. Would you agree with this? And what would you say needs to happen for the movement to gain momentum again?
Okay, I didn't read the article, and everybody is entitled of his opinion. On Friday, we had 792 rally points in Syria. 792 rally points is not easy. In Damascus, if you want to cross Damascus downtown, which is around 3 kilometers, you have to cross around 5 inspection points of the army inspection point. So having 729, I think, or something like this, some 700 plus rally point, or on Friday, that's something. Tell us more. We were in July when we crossed the 100 points. We had celebration. So I don't believe it is dying down. What I believe, some people of us getting tired of listening all the time on the news, so it starts toning down. And the other thing we have to say, okay, about that is the number of deaths in the street. We were starting, and this is very selective death. You know, we don't kill in Syria. We don't kill. The army do not kill randomly. It kills an order, and every week, every day, they have a maximum number of deaths available for them. It's not like you kill randomly, okay? And so when you have, in the beginning, you see that we started 10 deaths a day, and we came up to reaching 250 deaths a day, okay? Before the United Nations resolution. Today, since the 14th of April, we came back to around 35 deaths a day. Okay, so talking about the Syrian Revolution is dying down in my book, is not very factual. That's how I look at it. Now, we talk about also the revolution, and we talk about the Free Syrian Army, which is I wanted everybody to think about it. This is two different things. They are not the same thing. The revolution in Syria is a peaceful revolution. They started by getting out in the heat of the summer in a rally where soldiers shooting at them, and they goes to the soldier and give them water. Ahmad Sherbaji, Ghiyath Matar, taken out by the soldier. He was arrested by the soldier who is taking the bottle of water from him in the street, in the rally. And after 3 days returned to his family with his throat cut. Literally, his throat is missing from his body, because he told the soldier, I have only my voice to fight you with. This is a peaceful revolution. Now the Syrian Free Army, the Free Army Syrian, whatever you want to call it, the Free Army Syrian, it is not the revolution per se. But what's happening here, if you are in the Syrian army and you get order to shoot on a peaceful rally and you don't shoot, the regime thugs, the Republican Guard, and the security apparatus they have their own, every group they have their own snipers. They shoot you down. And now we have soldiers, they have options, either shooting on civilian or defecting. And now we have the Free Syrian Army established, because those who defected cannot go back to their homes because they're going to get killed, and they cannot obey the orders. So we have those defective who are in charge of protecting their own self. And to start with, they just run away with what they have in, if they have 60 bullets, which is 2 magazines in their Kalashnikov, that's all the bullets they have to start with. So once they run out of bullets, they just sit down, has no job at all. They run back to Turkey. Okay, so those guys, they assign to themselves the duty of protecting the rallies. For that, in Baba Amr, in Homs, the number of deaths in the rally in the beginning was very low, because what they do, the Free Syrian Army comes and surround the neighborhood where the rally is supposed to be, and they let the rally happen. So the thug of the regime cannot attack the rally, because these guys are protecting the rallies. okay? Later down the road, people who were protecting their own homes, they took arms and they found themselves have to run away and join these Free Syrian Army. I'm talking about protecting your home, which means I have a brother who has, oh, he didn't come up here. He has a house in the suburb of Damascus, okay? The thugs of the regime goes to the house and take everything in it, literally everything. And furthermore, the food that they can't eat, they can't carry out with it, they mix everything, all the foods in the middle of the kitchen so you can't use it anymore. Okay? So now you have a peaceful revolution and people who are very aware, I had to discuss long time, more than weeks and months with these guys just to convince them, don't let the thug hit you with a stick. Try to protect yourself. And they say, no, we don't. This is too much idealism, okay? But down the road, they found themselves, okay, we are losing on this battle because the peaceful revolution, the peaceful conflict is depending on the conscience of the other side. You get to bleed until the other side feel, okay, why I'm doing that? But we are facing a regime who doesn't have no conscience. And I can imagine, Assad saying to his guns in the meeting, my father killed 200,000 people in 1982 and lived 20 more years after that and gave me the power. All what I killed until now is 20,000. And I'm going to give the power to my son. So that's why there is this dichotomy in the Syrian situation between the revolution, which is totally peaceful, and the Free Syrian Army. And frankly, I am very with the peaceful revolution, but I cannot blame the Syrian Army, the Free Syrian Army. I can't ask officers who risk everything to go back to be peaceful. Don't defend yourself. Doesn't make sense. Okay? I hope I answered the question.
Everyone, I'm sorry, but in the interest of time, we have room for one more question. So if anyone really wants to ask something, please. Or you want to answer that?
No, just a comment. It's by chance yesterday doing my search for Assad atrocity. I'm just putting some terms in Google. So I found an article written in June last year, and also says that CIA believes that Assad will prevail, and that's 2011, and that was in June. So that was in the middle of the Hama million rallies that stayed till the end of July. So I call it wishful thinking, but doesn't mean that if the situation stays like this, with the world watching and giving us 30 months to cover a country that is the double size of Illinois and 24 million, this is what do you expect? It's as if they are giving him more chance to kill us in the hope that he will prevail. So this is part of the wishful thinking, and hope that the only thing that we can depend on literally is the will of the people. It is, as Mohyeddin said, it is a battle of will. So if the people stay the course, no matter what the sacrifice is, we will prevail, no matter what, because we have the right with us. And people understand, even when they talk about Hama 30 years ago, they understood there was one Friday named after, please forgive us Hama, because we should have stood with you. If we defended Hama 30 years ago, we're not now sitting talking about Bashar. Period.
Thank you, Saraj. So yes, are there any questions? No? Take your time. Yes, please.
Bashar al-Assad still enjoys the help of allies from the international community, such as Russia and China, continue to support him in the UN. What interest do these international allies have in keeping Assad in power?
Depends. So now it depends on that ally. So Iran, it has a faith issue. So we have to go back to their history of Shiism, anti-Sunni. So that's one. Russia is just a bully, basically anti-US. So to antagonize the US, we will do that. But I don't believe Russia will have that stand. Russia does not have a stand, but because the US allowed it. It should not be allowed to be a bully. Where is Russia in 20 years? Suddenly we have Russia back? I don't understand it. I'm not convinced. When you see something not convincing, I'm not convinced why Russia is back as, but we understand them. They are just polar bears, and they are anti-US. So how about, I was talking to a Chinese journalist. I said, something wrong with you. This issue, you are reactionary. You form your foreign policy just to antagonize the US, in a sense similar to Russia, but it's milder. It is milder. You need to be independent. Her answer to me said, Bara, we are similar. China is like Russia. What I hear from you about Assad is like Mao Zedong in the 60s. So we are still the same. Like I have many of my journalists, they are part of the intelligence, the Chinese intelligence. And I cannot say much. And you remember Tiananmen Square. So they have the record, which is not good record. So it's very natural to stand together. And just to antagonize the US. And what's upsetting is the US allowed them to stand. They don't have any leg to stand on. You can defeat them easily, especially we have the right and we have all the means to defeat them. Literally, they need to be defeated at the international arena. That should be. So each one has different causes and some minute things. So depends.
Okay, let's start by Iran. Iran, they have a saying, like if somebody want to fight with you, give him 2 watermelons. So he will carry 2 watermelons, he can't fight with you. And Iran knows the problem here is like her fight is with America. And America is right on the fight with it because as Arab countries, we don't want nuclear power in Middle East. You know, I don't believe Iran has nuclear ability is going to be attacking America. You know, is going to attack who? Who is going to be attacked by Iran power? That's going to be attacking Iran, Kuwait, Dubai, Qatar. She's going to be the gang of the neighborhood there. She wants to be a regional power. Okay, and for Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, and Bahrain are the 3 watermelons she is giving to America. Okay, and if Syria falls, Hezbollah is gonna be gone. Okay, and now is the turn of America, of Iran. So we know why it stands by Assad. And the other question here is Iran regime. Forget about the Shiism of it, the religious side of it. Iran regime is exactly like the Syrian regime, except it's founded on a religious principle. We have in Syria a social class, a new rich of social class, which is Assad and his Makhluf and his families. In Iran, they have the Revolutionary Guard, who became, after 40 years of the revolution, becomes a class by itself, dominating the economics life, especially in the military industry and in the oil industry. I'm not talking about the government own the equipment. No, officers in the Republican Guard are benefiting from that. They own all this stuff. So if Syria falls, becomes a democracy, the next revolution is going to be in Iran, and they are aware of that. The first one 2 years ago, it failed, but the next one is not going to fail in Iran. And that's why they stand by Assad. Some people think that they stand by Assad because he's Alawite and they are Shiite. No, Alawite, Shiite consider Alawite non-Muslim as much as the Sunni consider Alawite non-Muslim at a theological level. So religion here, it is not the major things. but religion is ridden by dictatorship to enforce its power on its own people. You know, I don't think that Ayatollahs there care too much about religion as much as power. In my experience, they tell me that power is more corrupting than money even. Okay, so this is the picture in Iran. And as Dr. Sarraj said about Russia, Russia's idea is to keep a footstep in the Middle East, and the last footstep for it is in Syria. If Syria gone to this American side, there is no way that Russia can find any place to land its even airplanes, okay, and submarines or something. There's no more in Mediterranean Sea any place to the Russian power. But this is a promising thing. Russians did committed political and diplomatic stupidity in my book when they vetoed the last resolution. And I think it was smart. I know some of you will not agree about me. It was a smart maneuver from our State Department to push the Russian to veto it, because instead of training and taking longer time, okay, the Russian has only one card to play, is the veto. So they said, okay, let's make them use this veto once for all. And what they're gonna do after that? Because they're gonna be able to use this veto instead of using the veto like 4 months ago. They can be using it today, and 3 months from now they can using it. So now the Russians rend themselves irrelevant in the Syrian issue. That's how I feel about it. You might disagree with me, but this is my opinion. What's relevant here, more than Russian, is the Turkish. The Turkish looking to become to Syria because they have very nice policy, the Turkish, they call it zero conflict, which means since the arrival of the Erdogan's party to the power 7 years ago, they have political principle that zero conflict with our to intervene in Iraq beside the United States, or let the United States go to Iraq through the Turkish land. Okay, and this is what they want to do. But what they want to do, they know, and they give up on Assad from the first day. If you read the Syrian propaganda, that's not true. They stayed in love with Turkey for 6 months in the revolution. But really, Turkey gave up on Assad from the first day, but they didn't announce it. They start withdrawing. What they want, the Turkish, is to look like liberator, not instigators in Syria. They want to be begged to intervene in Syria. They don't want to be looking like the enemy of the Syrian or any fraction of the Syrian population. So what they're doing is they're waiting to convince everybody that there's no other solution except than taking out the regime by power. And when we reach that moment, I believe Turkey has a lot of options, and one of them is using the 5th articles of NATO alliance, saying the Syrian regime is creating border and a national security threat to Turkey, and NATO by this article will find itself has to help Turkey in managing the situation in Syria. And I think that's where we are heading. The timing, that's I don't know. But that's, I think, where they're heading.
Well, thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you very much.
Please, one round of applause for our Thank you everyone again for coming. Thank you everyone. Thank you, co-host. You really did so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for coming all the way from Chicago. They drove and we're going to drive back again. So yes, thank you for coming. There's refreshments over there, everyone. If you would like.
Please help yourself.